My granddaughter whispered, "Nana, don't sign anything today." And everything I'd ignored finally snapped into focus. I felt the words like a pulse in my throat. Lily's breath warmed my ear, while the dining room hummed with weekend cheer, glasses clinking, a casserole steaming, my son's voice a notch too loud as he told a story that didn't need telling. The table was dressed like a holiday, even though it was only Sunday. Fresh flowers, polished forks, and at the far end, a leather folder laid out like a dessert we hadn't ordered. "Mom," Daniel said, catching my eye and flipping the folder open with the casual grace of a salesman. "We'll just get these papers out of the way so we can enjoy the day." Mara, his wife, set her hand on the folder. "It's truly simple," she said. "Just updating your records, power of attorney, a healthcare directive. We even printed the forms so you wouldn't have to fuss with the computer." I looked at my hands on the tablecloth and thought of how they used to look, flour-dusted when I baked for Little League fundraisers, grease-streaked from fixing the screen door so it wouldn't slam on Daniel's heels. I'd always been good with my hands. You can't raise a child in a garden without learning how to mend. "Before we do anything," I said, reaching for the water pitcher, "let me set out the peaches. They'll bruise in the bowl." While I stood, Lily brushed past me, her fingers squeezing my elbow, a silent, urgent code. She had stretched taller over the summer, the baby roundness leaving her face and something watchful taking its place. I turned toward the kitchen, where the sunlight was honest and the countertop smelled faintly of lemon oil. In the doorway, Lily followed. "What do you know?" I asked softly, choosing the good knife. "You didn't say that for nothing." She glanced toward the dining room and lowered her voice. "I saw Mom's texts. She was telling a realtor the house might be ripe. She said they'd have signatures by today. She sent pictures from inside your bedroom." The knife paused in my hand. Pictures from my bedroom. The sting of that outpaced the fear. Then the anger rose, clean and hot, and settled into something steady. I set the peaches on the board and ran the knife through the first one. "Thank you for telling me, Lily." "I tried to tell Dad," she said, twisting her hair around her finger. "He said I misunderstood." Sometimes grown-ups prefer a prettier story. I sliced, slid the fruit into a bowl, and wiped the blade with the cloth. "Stay close. If anyone asks, you can say the peaches needed sugar." When I returned, Daniel had produced a pen. Mara smiled in a way that reminded me of the tour guide at the retirement community they'd taken me to, just to look. The guide had used the word vibrant so many times it turned hollow in my ears. "Mom," Daniel said, "these are standard. Everyone our age is doing this for their parents." "Everyone?" I asked. "Everyone who cares," he said. How many times had I taught him not to measure love in averages? How many times had I told him that if everyone was jumping from the pier, it didn't make the water warmer? Mara lifted the top page and lined it up perfectly with the stack. "We even got a notary," she said, nodding at the hallway. "He'll be here any minute." Of course they had. The table, the flowers, the folder. It wasn't a Sunday lunch. It was a stage. "Before we sign anything," I said, "I want to understand why." "Because we worry," Daniel said quickly. "You left the stove on last month." "I boiled water past the whistle," I said. "It's a loud kettle. I was on the porch with the mail. I came back and turned it off." Mara made a sympathetic hum and tilted her head. "It's not about blame," she said. "It's about being proactive, streamlining, in case something happens." "In case I stop being me," I said. No one spoke. The front door chime sounded, and a man appeared with a briefcase and a tidy mustache he probably trimmed with a ruler. He shook Daniel's hand, didn't meet my eyes, and sat up at the console table like he'd been here before. I reached for the folder and slid out the top page. The language was familiar. I'd seen it weeks earlier in my attorney's office. The version on my table today was missing sentences, and the spaces for names were filled in with handwriting that wasn't mine. "I appreciate the effort," I said, "but I have my own forms." "You do?" Daniel's eyebrows climbed. "Since when?" "Since I made an appointment with a neurologist after I lost the name of the street I've lived on for 42 years, I said. "He tested me, and then he looked me in the eye. He said my memory is as ordinary as a kitchen sink, above average for my age." He wrote it down. I reached into my purse, removed an envelope, and placed it on the table. "I also saw a lawyer. She told me what these papers do and what they don't." Mara's smile thinned by a millimeter. "We're all on the same team," she said. I brushed a crumb from the paper and asked the question that had been burning a thin hole in my chest for months. "If we are, why did I find a camera in my bedroom clock?" The mustached man coughed. Daniel looked at Mara as if she'd said something impolite in church. Mara didn't blush. She reached for the water glass and kept her voice even. "Security. After you fell in the bathroom." "I tripped on a bath mat," I said. "I told you I didn't want cameras." "They're standard," she said, like standard was a pillow you could tuck beneath any discomfort if you had a medical emergency. If I had a medical emergency, I'd need an ambulance, not an audience, I said, and turned to Daniel. "Did you know about the camera?" His mouth opened, then closed. He didn't like being asked questions without easy answers. He'd been that way since he was 12, and his teacher called to say he'd taken someone's baseball cards because they were just sitting there. "Mom," he said now, "you're blowing one little thing out of proportion." Was it little? Was it little to be watched while you changed your shirt? To have your still warm bed pressed between a stranger's fingers? Was it little to open your nightstand and find the sacred space of your own life translated into a line item on someone else's plan? "How could my own son think this is care?" I asked, and the words came out level, quieter than the rage they carried. How could my son look at my house and see an opportunity instead of a history? He flinched. "This isn't fair." Fair. That was the word he'd loved as a child. Fair meant equal pieces of cake, rotating chores, consequences that matched the mess. He used to stand on a dining chair and watch me cut brownies, scanning for edges and corners like a jeweler's loop. "Fair," I repeated. "Let's talk about fair." I stacked the pages in front of me and pulled out my second envelope. The notary's pen paused over his book. The air in the room changed like summer right before it breaks into rain. "Last Thursday," I said, "someone used my checkbook to pay a credit card bill from an account that isn't mine. I slid a photocopy across the wood. The memo line read, "Balance forward." The bank manager called to confirm. He's known me for 20 years. He knows how I sign. Mara's spine straightened. That could be identity theft. Anyone could... It could, I agreed. And that's why I asked for the video. The bank has a camera by the night deposit box. The police do, too. It's amazing how many angles watch us while we believe no one is looking. I pulled the next sheet free. False calm has a scent. It smells like furniture polish and breath mints. Daniel's hands were flat on the table now, as if the wood could steady what was coming. On the photograph, under the fluorescent glow of the night deposit, a figure in a quilted jacket fed an envelope into the slot with a familiar impatience. The face was tilted up, leaving no room for doubt. I did not look at my son. I looked at the girl who had warned me in the kitchen, the only one who had chosen me over convenience. "I didn't want this," I said to Lily. She shook her head, eyes swimming. "I know." Mara pushed her chair back. "This is absurd. We came here to help, and you're accusing us." "You came here to take," I said. "You came here with papers and a man who doesn't introduce himself." The mustached notary cleared his throat. "I'm just here for identification and signatures." "Of course you are," I said. "May I see your commission card?" He blinked, then produced it. I compared the name to the texts Lily had shown me 2 nights earlier. The conversation thread had been saved under a nickname, Kenny Notary. There were fees quoted, a timeline outlined, a winking face next to the phrase, ASAP. I placed my final envelope on the table and looked at the door. It opened before I called out. 2 people stepped in. My attorney, Ms. Patel, in her calm navy suit, and a soft-spoken woman from Adult Protective Services who had visited me last week just to chat. They'd parked down the block the way I asked. "Good afternoon," Ms. Patel said. "Mrs. Alvarez, thank you for inviting us." Mara stood, cheeks high with color. "You ambushed us." I didn't stand. My knees would have trembled, and I wanted my voice, not my body, to carry the weight. "No," I said. "I prepared. There's a difference." Ms. Patel slid a folder into the space between the flowers and the scattered papers. "We'll keep this brief," she said. "Mrs. Alvarez updated her estate plan last month. She has a durable healthcare proxy assigned to a neutral third party, my firm. Until and unless she revokes it, she transferred her home into a living trust. Any attempt to sell, mortgage, or encumber the property without the trustee's consent is void. There's a no-contest clause regarding any beneficiary who exerts undue influence, including surreptitious surveillance, financial coercion, or forgery." Daniel's voice broke. "Mom, you put the house in a trust without telling me?" "I told you for a year that I wanted a conversation," I said. "I told you I wanted respect." The APS worker spoke gently. "This is an opportunity. We can make a plan to move forward safely. If we need to involve law enforcement, we will. But this is first, best step, naming what happened." "What happened," Daniel said, "is that you turned my daughter against me." Lily flinched. I felt the old familiar instinct, to absorb the strike, to smooth the air. I let it pass, Some work belongs to the one who swung. I turned nobody, I said. I listened to her. She is the only person in this room who asked me what I wanted before deciding what I needed. Mara's chair scraped. "We should go," she hissed at Daniel. But he wasn't done. His hands had balled into fists like the boy who used to lose his temper over chess. "You're punishing me for planning ahead," he said. "Do you know how insane that sounds? Do you know how my bedroom looked with a red blink at midnight?" I asked. "Do you know how my name looked in someone else's hand?" He stared at the papers and then at me. The love I had for him didn't leave. It changed shapes the way a river does when a dam reroutes it. It curved around what it could not move through. Ms. Patel gathered the documents I'd brought. "Here are your copies," she said to me. "We filed everything with the county. The trust's deed is recorded. Your bank accounts now require 2 signatures, yours and the trustees, for transfers over a modest amount. We set that amount together. Remember?" "I remember," I said. The notary closed his book, sensing what everyone else finally understood. There would be no signatures here today. "Before you go," I said, and my own voice surprised me with how steady it was, "I have something to return." I pulled the clock from a shopping bag by my chair. I had found the camera last week when I dusted and the cloth snagged on a seam that had never been there. I replaced the bedroom clock. "This one belongs to you." Mara's lips parted, then sealed. She reached for it, but I kept my hand on the top a moment longer. "You placed it where the morning light hits first," I said. "That's where I keep the photograph of my wedding day. The camera caught our faces every dawn. Did you ever look at them? Or did you forward the feed and call it caring?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. And in that silence, something old and brittle inside me gave way. Not my spine, not my will. The brittle thing was the hope that if I behaved precisely enough, kind enough, patient enough, useful enough, no one I loved would ever use my goodness as a lever. Daniel turned, his eyes skating anywhere but mine. "Let's go," he said. "This is ridiculous." He brushed past Lily. She stepped aside without touching him. He was halfway to the door when he stopped. "What about Sunday dinners?" he asked, as if the question could fix what the facts had broken. I looked at him, at the man whose knees I had once kissed when he skinned them on the cracked sidewalk, the man whose future I had imagined 1,000 generous ways. "Call me when you're ready to apologize," I said. "Call me when you're ready to be my son." He stood, another heartbeat, then left. Mara followed with the clock pressed to her chest like a baby she didn't know how to hold. The notary muttered that he would invoice later. The door shut. The flowers in the center of the table breathed their sweet indifference. Lily's chair squeaked as she sat. She had been holding herself very still, a girl in a museum taught not to touch. When she exhaled, her shoulders dropped. "I didn't want to ruin anything," she said. "You saved it," I told her. "You saved what mattered." Ms. Patel collected the last stray page. "I'll check in tomorrow," she said, and the APS worker left her card with a number circled in blue pen. They both told me what people say at the end of floods and fires. It could have been worse. You did the right thing. Then they left too. The house quieted. The clock in the hallway counted the soft, ordinary minutes. Lily and I moved together, automatic as a dance we'd practiced. We wrapped leftovers, rinsed glasses, restored the table. When the dishes were stacked to dry, she turned to me with something like fear and something like pride. "What now?" she asked. Now. The words settled into the room like a new piece of furniture. Practical, permanent. "Now," I said, "we eat the peaches. And I tell you a story so you know why I didn't sign even before you told me not to." We carried pie to the porch and ate while the light slid over the roses. I told her the part she hadn't seen, the part I had kept tucked behind my quiet, back when I was still trying to choose a version of my son that didn't bruise the heart to hold. It began the Wednesday I forgot the name of my own street. I stood on the corner with a bag of apples digging into my fingers, and the word wavered just out of reach. It frightened me. I went home and made tea, then called my doctor. The neurologist smelled like cedar and wore a tie with tiny bicycles. He asked me to tap my finger to my thumb, to draw a clock, to remember 3 words: lake, cinnamon, coin. He told me a story, and then, without warning, asked me to tell it back. I did. He asked what day it was and who was president and what year my grandchildren were born. My answers landed steady. "Ordinary forgetfulness," he said. "You've earned it." Still, a door had opened in my mind, and once open, a door invites things in. I thought about what would happen if I lost more than a street name. I sat at my kitchen table and made lists: plumber, electrician, mortgage, propane, taxes. Then I made another appointment, this time with Ms. Patel. She explained powers of attorney in words that didn't require a dictionary. She explained trusts. She listened when I told her about my son's new habit of speaking about my house as if it were already a line item in his future. "Planning is a kindness," she said, "but planning done to you is not the same as planning done with you." We built a plan. She drafted documents. I read them twice. Then again, she witnessed my signature and filed what needed filing. On the way home, I stopped at the bank and asked Mr. Kellerman, who had watched Daniel grow from a freckled boy into a man with a briefcase, to add an alert to my accounts. "Humor me," I told him. "If anything looks wrong, call first, even if it's me." That was 2 weeks before the camera blinked in my bedroom. I found it by accident. The old clock on my dresser lost time. I'd planned to replace it, when the dust cloth snagged on a seam that had never been there. My stomach dropped. I pried the back open with a butter knife and found the pinhole lens. The battery pack was new. The memory card was empty. Someone had set it to stream. I unplugged it and sat on the edge of the bed with the clock in my lap like a foolish pet. That night, I learned more about my own Wi-Fi than I ever wanted to know. A neighbor's son came over and helped me map connected devices. There it was. A new ghost with a harmless name. I changed my password and took a picture of the screen because I knew, even in my shaking, that pictures tell truths We later doubt. When Lily texted to ask if I was home Sunday for dinner, I said yes. And then I called Ms. Patel and asked a question I never thought I'd ask about anyone I loved. If they push, am I ready to push back? She said I was. After the confrontation, the house felt both violated and clean. I slept with my bedroom window cracked, the night air rinsing the day. In the morning, I walked to the bank. Mr. Kellerman met me in his office and poured coffee from a carafe that tasted like paper cups and habit. We printed the images from the night deposit camera. I filed a report with APS to document everything formally. The camera, the forged check, the attempts to isolate me from decisions. The social worker's voice was kind, not pitying. "You're not alone," she said. "We see this more than you'd think." Back home, I wrote 3 letters, one to the Notary licensing board, enclosing a copy of his texts agreeing to witness signatures in a home where the signer hadn't been told what she was signing. One to the realtor's broker with screenshots of the bedroom photos, and a request to remove any unauthorized listings and confirm in writing that my property was not and would not be marketed. One to myself, in a voice I recognize from my younger days. You are not a burden. You are a boundary. By Tuesday, the broker called to apologize. "We took the preview down," she said. "It was never officially listed." As if unofficial trespasses return themselves to innocence, she sent me a letter promising discipline for the agent who had marched through my bedroom. I put the letter in the file Ms. Patel had labeled home. Paper makes a satisfying sound when it lands in a folder. It sounds like something concluding. Mara struck back faster than I expected. On Thursday morning, a process server arrived with a stack of papers, an emergency petition for temporary guardianship. They had listed the camera under safety measures undertaken, and my forgetting the street name as evidence of cognitive decline. I called Ms. Patel. Her voice stayed level. "It's ex parte for now," she said. "We'll be heard on Monday. I'll be there. Bring your evaluation and bring Lily if she's willing." Over the weekend, the house was busy with practicalities and quiet with fear. Lily brought her backpack and slept on the couch. We made soup and a plan. I practiced saying true things without shaking. When the fear peaked, the hour when the mind tries to rename you a helpless thing, I went to the garden and counted stems. Monday arrived looking like any other day. Trash trucks shuddering down the street. The smell of coffee from my neighbor's porch. But inside the courthouse, time was different. The hallway hummed with other families in their private wars. The courtroom itself was smaller than movies make them. People's breath is closer in rooms where lives are sorted. The judge had hair like fresh snow and glasses on a chain. She asked for my name, then for theirs. Mara sat with her lawyer, posture unbothered, wearing a jacket the color of iced tea. Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mrs. Alvarez," the judge said, "there's a petition seeking temporary guardianship over you and your estate, alleging safety concerns and cognitive impairment. Do you have counsel?" "Present," Ms. Patel said, standing. "Proceed," the judge said. Mara's lawyer went first, smooth as a skating rink. He spoke of falls, of misplaced bills, of concerning behavior. He described me forgetting a street name like a foreshadowing thundercloud. He used the word risk so many times it became a pressure in the room. Then he called Daniel. My son took the stand and answered in a voice made small by microphones. "Do you love your mother?" the lawyer asked to finish soft. "Yes," Daniel said, and for a second, I believed he did not hear how love can be mispronounced. Ms. Patel stood. Her questions were clean. She handed the judge my neurologist's evaluation. She explained the trust and why we set it up. She played a short clip of our banker's call, the part where he asked me to confirm whether I'd authorized a payment and my no carried the weight of a slammed door. She placed on the evidence table the clock with the hidden camera. The judge's mouth tightened. "Who installed it?" she asked. Mara didn't blink. "For safety." "Did Mrs. Alvarez consent?" "It was implied." "By whom?" Mara looked at Daniel. He looked at his hands. The judge looked at me. "Would you like to testify, Mrs. Alvarez?" she asked. "Yes," I said, and took the oath. The wood rail felt warm under my fingers. I told the truth the way you untangle a cord, patiently, refusing to yank. I told her I forget nouns on Tuesdays sometimes, and that I started labeling my spice jars in bigger letters for ease and dignity, not because I had been turned to paper. I told her about the clock, about the bank, about my son asking me to sign the cleanest theft I'd ever seen. "Was there a notary present?" the judge asked. "Yes," I said. "He didn't introduce himself. I asked for his card. He has since been reported." I did not add that sometimes revenge is nothing more than filing the right form with a calm pen. At the end, Ms. Patel called Lily. I didn't want to do that to her. I also didn't want her to watch adults make decisions about her future, while her voice sat unused in her throat. She walked to the stand with the careful courage of a girl deciding who she would be. "Why did you tell your grandmother not to sign?" Ms. Patel asked. "Because I saw texts," Lily said. "Because they weren't talking with her. They were talking about her. Because when I asked Dad why there were pictures from Nana's bedroom, he told me it was nothing, and not to worry about it, and it felt like something." The judge thanked her and asked if she was all right. Lily said yes. I believed her. The decision was short. The petition was denied. The judge used the word boundary and the words undue influence. She ordered that no cameras be placed in my home without my written consent, that any attempt to list or sell my property without the trustee's signature would be contempt, and that the guardianship court was not a shortcut for family disagreements that could have been replaced by a conversation. She suggested counseling. She raised her eyebrows at Daniel in a way I recognize from every principal we ever met. Outside, the air cracked open. We didn't cheer. We exhaled. Ms. Patel squeezed my shoulder and said she'd file the order with the recorder by end of day. Mara walked past without looking at us. Daniel started to, then stopped. The words on his tongue were excuses first, then silence. In the days that followed, people began to pick sides the way they always do when a story finally comes out of the house and into the street. At church, a woman I'd known for 20 years hugged me like a survivor and said, We always suspected, as if suspicion were a virtue. At the garden club, no one said the word camera, but the air was thick with it. I brought cupcakes and placed them on the table, then watered the ferns with more attention than I gave most human conversations. When one of the women asked if I needed anything, I said, "Yes, ask your parents what they want while they can still answer," and watched her face accept a homework she didn't expect. I didn't hide. I told the truth in simple words whenever I was asked. There is a magic in saying out loud what someone hopes you will hide. It turns the secret from a weapon into a fact. Then came the storage unit. The key arrived in a plain envelope dropped on my porch. It was the kind of thing that might have made me nervous before the hearing. After, it felt like a thread I was meant to follow. Lily rode shotgun, her hair in a loose braid she kept undoing and redoing the way a body burns nervousness without letting it catch fire. Inside the unit, dust moved in the light like underwater things. There were boxes labeled with a pen that had once lived in our junk drawer. Halloween, trophies, camp. In the back, a plastic bin of photographs. On top lay a corkboard I hadn't seen in years. The family calendar I used to pin in the garage. Under the grocery lists and dentist reminders, a yellowed envelope addressed in my husband's square, patient handwriting. For Elena, someday, when it's needed. I sat on a turned-over crate and opened it. Inside was a letter, written the winter before he died. He had always been a careful man, and his carefulness lived in his sentences. You once told me that people show you their hungers when they think you can't stop them, he had written. If the day comes when I'm not there to argue about light bulbs and rakes, set your guardrails before anyone else sets them for you. Daniel is a good boy who will need reminding that good boys are not owed easy things for being good. If he learns that lesson from anyone, let it be you, and put the house in a trust for your sake. Love, M. The letter was not a prophecy. It was permission. I folded it back into the envelope and felt the strange, fierce comfort of being accompanied by the dead. While I read, Lily rummaged with a teenager's blend of curiosity and respect. She found a certificate Daniel had earned for honesty in 4th grade. "That's funny," she said, then flushed. "Not funny, just keep it," I said. "Someday he might need it." We loaded a bin of photos into the car and drove home through the kind of late afternoon that makes even old sidewalks look kind. The house didn't feel like a stage anymore. It felt like a home that had survived an attempted performance and reclaimed its rehearsal. Mara was not done. She posted a long note online about how hard decisions are misunderstood by people outside the situation. A neighbor sent me a screenshot like a child delivering contraband. I did not reply. Online is a place for yelling into mirrors. Real life is where the doorbell rings. It rang again the following Wednesday. A young agent stood on my porch with hair like a helmet and a smile like a sales banner. "Just confirming the pre-listing walkthrough," she trilled. "Wednesday at 3? "There's no walkthrough," I said. She raised her clipboard like a shield. Mara said, I imagine she said many things, I answered. Here's what's true. The property is held in trust. This is a copy of the order denying guardianship, with a note about unauthorized listings. If anyone enters my home without written permission, I'll file a complaint with your broker and with the state. I was not angry. I was a lamppost with a light turned on. She blinked, adjusted her helmet hair, and left. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against it and marveled at how grown women sometimes go to work and forget the difference between a door and a suggestion. The notary board wrote back 2 weeks later. They had opened an ethics inquiry for Kenny Notary and requested my statement be added to the record. I pictured his mustache and his tiny ledger and hoped he would remember that convenience is not a code of conduct. In the middle of these small victories, life kept its hum. Lily started school. I packed her sandwiches the way I used to pack Daniel's. Apple slices fanned under wax paper, a napkin with a drawn heart. She came to my house after the last bell and did homework at the table. We practiced vocabulary words and built a simple sensor for her science class that moaned when the garden soil was dry. She called it the Thirsty Rose and wrote her name in thin blue letters along the edge. Sometimes she cried and didn't know why. Sometimes she laughed at something on her phone and snorted like a puppy learning its own sounds. Each day, a piece of the fear inside me dried out and flaked away. Weeks unspooled, busy and quiet. Then Daniel texted to ask if I would meet him in the park. I considered saying no. Then I remembered the long list of things that don't change when you ignore them. He sat on a bench under a maple shedding coins of light. He looked older, not in the face exactly, but around the edges, where strain writes its notes. I messed up, he said without preamble. What did you call it when you did it? I asked. Protecting you, he said. But it was taking from you, rearranging your life to make mine easier. He rubbed his hands together, the way he did whenever he had to throw a ball to first and the runner set his stance early. I forgot you're a person. I treated you like a problem. How do you plan to remember? I asked. I told Mara to move out, he said, and the words wobbled. We're separated. I paid the bank back. I closed the account we used to float balances. I started therapy. It was awful the first time. I said the same sentence 6 different ways until the therapist said, "That's the sentence where you hide the part where you're wrong." He half laughed, which is to say he coughed out a shard of pride and then picked it up with his bare hands. I know none of this fixes it. It doesn't, I said, but it aligns the furniture. He nodded. I'll do whatever you say. Don't, I said. That's how we got here. I'll tell you what I need, and you can decide if you're willing to do it. He waited. Therapy. For as long as it takes, no access to my accounts now or ever. You earn coffee with me, then maybe lunch, then maybe dinner. You apologize to your daughter without asking her to soothe you. You understand that forgiveness without change is permission, and I'm finished with permission. He said yes to all of it. He did not ask for a shorter list. That Saturday, He knocked at my back door and stood there wiping his feet like a boy who'd been told to try again and wanted to get it right. "Can I help in the garden?" he asked. "You can put your hands in the dirt," I said, "and you can listen." We weeded in parallel rows. The words between us were small and honest. Pass the trowel. Careful of the root. It rained last night. When he left, he took nothing that wasn't his. Mara tried once more, not with papers, but with presents. I found her on my porch on a Tuesday at dusk, photographing the door. "We're documenting the condition," she said when I opened it, "in case of—" She trailed off because the sentence had nowhere to go. "In case of what?" I asked. "In case of litigation," she said, testing the word like a tongue on a chipped tooth. "Take one more picture," I said, "and it will be of the officer I called to walk you off my property." I wasn't angry. I was someone who had learned the difference between a boundary and a dare. She left with that jacket the color of iced tea, and her phone held like a passport that didn't work at this border. After she was gone, I sat on the steps and read my husband's letter again. Good boys are not owed easy things for being good. It sounded less like a warning now, and more like a map. I put the letter in a new frame and set it on the dresser where the clock used to be. The morning light found it first. When Lily's science fair came, Daniel showed up with a coffee and a folding chair and a face that lived somewhere between pride and shame. Lily's thirsty rose chirped exactly when it was supposed to. She explained voltage to a judge with gray hair and a bolo tie. Daniel stood a foot away from me and kept his hands in his pockets like a person trying to keep himself from touching a hot stove. "You made her brave," he said under his breath. "She made herself brave," I answered. "I provided snacks." He laughed a little. The sound of a fence mended enough to keep a dog in, even if it still leaned. I allowed him coffee the next week. Lunch after that. We ate in public places with receipts and chairs that didn't belong to either of us. He told me the truth in pieces. I took it without seasoning. The house flip that failed. The second mortgage they couldn't sustain. The way Mara's ambition ate his vanity, and how that combination tasted like competence until it didn't. He cried once, not because I asked him to, and not because he thought it would move me, but because a boy sometimes realizes the man he has been is not the man he meant to be, and grief comes to collect. I told him my truth too, that I had been so busy being useful I forgot to be unafraid, that I would not apologize for being the kind of mother who would rather risk his anger than lose my name. The Notary Board sent a final letter. His commission was suspended for 6 months, mandatory ethics training required. The realtor's broker emailed to confirm that her agent had been reprimanded, and that my address had been flagged, so no listing could be created without trustee approval. Small, quiet consequences. I filed both letters in Ms. Patel's folder. There was a satisfaction in that sound again, paper concluding. When Lily asked if she could continue coming after school for a while, I said yes with a relief that surprised me. It turned out my revenge wasn't a dish or a speech or a headline. It was a door I closed and a table I set, on my terms. A month later, a mediation center called to offer family sessions. "Judge's suggestion," the woman said, Sometimes people do better in a room where the rules are written on the wall. We went. The room was painted an unthreatening green. The rules were written in block letters. Use I statements, no interruptions. Assume good faith until facts say otherwise. In that room, Daniel said, I wanted to be the son who handled things. I said, I wanted to be the mother whose life wasn't handled. Lily drew circles on her notepad and finally said, I wanted the adults to stop whispering. The mediator nodded and reminded us that wanting is not the same as planning. We walked out with a list that felt less like punishment and more like practice. On the day autumn arrived for real, I hosted Sunday dinner again. There were 2 plates and 1 candle. The table was not set like a holiday. It was set like an ordinary day that had survived extraordinary pressure. Lily did homework while I rolled pie crust. Daniel knocked and stood at the threshold, waiting to be invited the way a man learns to do when the house is not his, because it never was. We ate. He washed the dishes. He left. The door closed without the sound of any plan but mine. I found the letter from my husband a week later tucked behind the new clock where I'd slipped it out of habit. I sat on the edge of the bed and read it one more time. It did not contain instructions for the next part of my life. It didn't have to. It had given me back the right to choose a map. The garden asked for winter prep. I pruned and mulched and tucked roses in until only their stubborn hearts showed. When I stood, my back reminded me that 72 is not a rumor. I went inside and warmed my hands around a mug of cinnamon tea. The house smelled like apples because the oven had, and because love lingers in sugar the way smoke lingers in wool. The doorbell rang near dusk. I opened it to see Daniel holding a folding chair again. Why the chair? I asked. It keeps me from staying too long, he said, and I smiled in spite of myself. He unfolded it on the lawn. He sat. The maples tossed coins of light again, because some scenes repeat when they're trying to teach you how to end them better. I have a question, he said, rubbing his palms on his jeans. Do you think I'm a good man who did a bad thing, or a man who did a bad thing and now has to become good? I looked at him and at the house and at the path between. I think you're a man who forgot what good required, I said, and I think that can be remembered. He nodded. He didn't cry. He didn't present a pen. He didn't make a promise he couldn't keep. He said, I'm going to my meeting after this, and I realized he meant therapy the way some men mean church. Good, I said. Text me when you want coffee. We'll see. He stood, folded the chair, and left me with a yard that contained no secrets. I went inside. Lily came through the gate from the alley, her backpack thumping against her hip, her hair shining with the last of the day's light. How are you? She asked. I'm a woman who didn't sign, I said. I am exactly who I say I am. She smiled. Good. We set the table. 2 plates, 1 candle. Sunday dinner, ours. We ate the apple pie we'd baked, and then I taught her how to cut slits in the crust so the steam could escape. That's the trick with pies and with grief. You make room for the heat to go somewhere. Later, when the dishes were dry and the house had that settled sound it gets when it knows the people inside it are safe, Lily curled on the couch and asked, "What did Grandpa teach you that I should know?" I thought of the letter and of his careful hands folding nets after we took the kids to the lake. "He taught me to check the rope before the tide changes," I said, "and that people tell you who they are when they think you can't stop them. They show you their hungers and their shortcuts. Then they call it destiny." She watched the ceiling for a long moment. "And what do we do when they show us?" "We set our guardrails," I said, "before anyone else sets them for us." She nodded. The house breathed. Somewhere outside, a car door closed and then opened again. Someone was arriving. Someone else leaving. All the ordinary movements that make a neighborhood tick. It turned out revenge wasn't the poison I'd always imagined. It wasn't a dish served cold. It was a boundary laid down so cleanly that anyone who tripped on it had to reckon with their own feet. I replaced the lock on my bedroom door, not because I needed to keep someone out, but because I wanted the sound of it clicking shut in a house that still belonged to me. I kept the trust in place and extended my will to include a small scholarship for Lily to use on what she chose, books or welding or rent. I wrote Daniel a letter of my own, the kind a mother writes when she has learned the cost of her quiet. I did not mail it. I put it in the frame behind my husband's letter. Someday, if it's needed. The next time the doorbell rang with flowers and folders and men with neat mustaches, I would answer with my kitchen-strong hands and a voice that remembered every word it needed. The scent of cinnamon would be in the air, and the clock would tick in honest seconds, and my granddaughter would be at the table, doing her homework under a lamp that made the paper glow. Because little did they know, and now they do. I was preparing all along.
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.